The train screeched to a halt, the sound grinding against Akira Mori's nerves as he stepped onto the solitary platform of the mountain village's station. The chilled air bit at his face, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and pine. Above, the jagged peaks loomed, their tops obscured by dense, gray clouds that mirrored the heavy atmosphere weighing on the village below. Akira adjusted the strap of his leather satchel, his sharp gaze sweeping over the deserted platform. Beyond it, narrow trails twisted toward the cluster of wooden houses clinging to the mountainside, their dark windows staring back like watchful eyes. The isolation of the place was palpable, pressing in on him as he scanned the empty surroundings. The scent of burning wood drifted faintly from somewhere in the distance. There was no welcoming committee, no sign of the villagers, only the oppressive silence that seemed to stretch endlessly. Akira was used to unease, but this village seemed to revel in it. Footsteps echoed from the far end of the platform, and a figure emerged from the mist-shrouded trail. A woman in a long coat walked briskly toward him, her boots clicking against the weathered planks. Her sharp features and dark eyes carried an air of determination, but there was something guarded in her expression, a wariness that mirrored the village itself.
Detective Mori, I presume?
Her voice was clipped professional, but Akira detected the faintest edge of unease beneath it. He nodded, offering a polite bow.
Miss Tanaka, thank you for meeting me.
She gave a tight smile, motioning toward the trail.
It's a short walk to the village. We can talk on the way.
The trail wound through a forest of towering cedars, their branches forming a canopy that filtered the weak sunlight into dim patches of gray. The ground was uneven, the roots twisting like skeletal hands through the dirt. Akira's footsteps crunched against the gravel as Sakura led the way, her pace brisk but deliberate.
The reports mentioned 3 disappearances, all within the past month.
Sakura glanced over her shoulder, her expression tightening.
Yes. First a young woman, then an older man, and most recently, a teenage boy. None of them left any sign of where they went or why.
Her words were clipped, but Akira caught the flicker of something in her eyes, frustration, or perhaps fear.
And the villagers? How are they responding?
Sakura hesitated before answering.
They're suspicious of outsiders. They think too many questions will stir up trouble, but some of them know more than they're letting on.
The path opened into a clearing, and the village came into view. The houses were simple, their wooden frames weathered by years of exposure to the elements. Smoke curled from a few chimneys, but the streets were eerily empty. Akira noted the way curtains shifted in windows as they passed, shadows moving just out of sight. A group of villagers huddled near a well in the center of the square. Their conversation died as Akira and Sakura approached, their wary eyes tracking his every step. An older woman muttered something to the man beside her, her tone sharp and accusatory.
Not exactly a warm welcome.
Sakura's lips pressed into a thin line.
It's been like this since the first disappearance. Fear does strange things to people.
The inn was at the edge of the village, its wooden facade slightly more polished than the surrounding buildings. Inside, the scent of cedar and damp stone filled the air. The innkeeper, a wiry man with darting eyes, greeted them with a stiff bow. His movements hurried as he showed Akira to his room. Over tea in the common room, Sakura leaned forward, her voice low.
There's one place you'll want to see. The shrine. It's where the boy was last seen.
Akira raised an eyebrow.
A shrine?
She nodded, her fingers brushing the edge of her cup.
It's old, older than the village itself. Some of the villagers think it's cursed. Superstition, mostly. But it's secluded, and there have been incidents there before.
Her hesitation was brief, but Akira caught it. He studied her carefully.
You don't believe in curses, do you, Miss Tanaka?
She met his gaze, her expression unreadable.
I believe in people, what they're capable of, and what they're willing to do to protect themselves.
Later that evening, Akira ventured out alone. The path to the shrine was overgrown, the trees on either side pressing in like silent sentinels. The air grew colder as he climbed, the distant sound of water trickling through the forest. His flashlight cut through the darkness, its beam bouncing off the dense foliage. The shrine appeared suddenly, its torii gate looming out of the shadows. The structure was weathered but intact, its wooden beams darkened with age. Stone steps led up to the main altar, flanked by fox statues whose faces were worn smooth by time. Akira noted the faint scratches on the base of one statue, marks that didn't match the weathering on the rest of the structure. He crouched to examine them, his flashlight illuminating faint grooves in the stone. They looked deliberate, as though someone had carved them recently. A few feet away, half buried in the dirt, lay a mask. Akira picked it up, brushing away the soil. The mask was simple, yet unsettling, its angular design resembling a fox's face. As he turned it over, his flashlight caught something etched into the back, a series of lines and symbols, faint but deliberate. He frowned, studying the markings. They weren't decorative, they looked like coordinates. A rustling sound snapped him to attention. He rose, his hand instinctively moving to the small blade at his side. His flashlight scanned the trees, catching nothing but shadows shifting in the wind. The forest was silent again, but the unease lingered.
Coordinates? Or a warning?
He slipped the mask into his bag and turned back toward the village, his steps quickening as the feeling of being watched refused to fade. The village square was alive with muted activity, yet the atmosphere was anything but welcoming. Merchants half-heartedly arranged their wares, their eyes darting nervously toward the forest's edge. Children played near the well in hushed tones, their laughter subdued, as if afraid to break an unspoken rule. Akira Mori stood near the stone well, his gaze sharp as he observed the undercurrent of tension threading through the villagers' movements. A stooped elder shuffled past, his gnarled hands gripping a basket of firewood. Akira intercepted him with a polite bow.
Good morning, sir. I'm investigating the recent disappearances. Perhaps you could share what you know?
The man froze, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Akira. His voice, when it came, was rough and low.
I've nothing to say. You should leave before you get yourself involved.
Involved in what?
The elder's grip on the basket tightened, his knuckles whitening. He muttered something under his breath, a prayer, perhaps, before shuffling away without another word. Akira's gaze followed him until a tug on his sleeve drew his attention downward. A boy no older than 10 stood at his side. He clutched a wooden toy fox, its paint chipped and faded. His wide eyes darted nervously between Akira and the elder's retreating figure.
They won't tell you, but I know. I've seen the foxes.
Akira crouched to the boy's level, keeping his voice calm.
Foxes? What do you mean?
The boy hesitated, glancing toward the square before leaning in close.
They come at night, by the shrine. But they're not like real foxes. They're bigger, and they wear masks.
Akira's jaw tightened. He reached into his satchel and retrieved the mask he'd found the night before, holding it up for the boy to see.
Like this?
The boy's eyes widened, and he nodded vigorously. Before Akira could press further, a sharp voice rang out.
Show. Get back here.
A woman emerged from one of the houses, her expression tight with anger. She grabbed the boy by the arm, pulling him away from Akira. Her glare was as much for the detective as it was for her son.
You shouldn't fill his head with questions. Leave him be.
Without waiting for a response, she led the boy back toward their home, the wooden fox toy swinging limply from his hand. Akira watched them go, the boy's words circling in his mind. The trail to Hannah's home was overgrown, the path lined with wild herbs and foxglove swaying gently in the breeze. Her house was small and unassuming, its exterior weathered by years of rain and wind. Akira knocked once, the sound echoing dully, before the door creaked open to reveal Hannah's sharp, appraising eyes.
You're the detective. Come in.
Her voice held neither warmth nor hostility, only practicality. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of dried herbs hanging in bundles from the ceiling. Akira noted the sparse furnishings, a low wooden table, a single chair, and a wall lined with shelves holding jars of various powders and liquids. Hannah motioned for him to sit, taking the chair while he settled on the floor. She reached for a kettle, pouring tea into two mismatched cups.
You're here about the shrine, aren't you?
I am. The boy mentioned seeing figures there at night, wearing masks.
Hannah's hand paused mid-pour, but she quickly resumed, setting the cup in front of him.
Figures in masks. They've been coming here for years, longer than I've been alive.
Akira raised an eyebrow.
Who are they?
Hannah's gaze drifted to the window, her lips pressing into a thin line.
Smugglers, probably. Or thieves. The shrine's always been a convenient place to hide things. There are tunnels beneath it, ones even the villagers don't all know about. It's old, older than this village. It's seen its share of bloodshed.
Bloodshed?
She nodded, her voice lowering.
Centuries ago, the shrine was caught in a feud between two clans. They used it to store weapons, gold, even prisoners. The tunnels were a death trap for anyone who got caught in them. Some say the shrine's cursed because of it. But curses don't explain what's happening now.
Akira leaned forward, his tone measured.
What does explain it, Hannah?
Her eyes met his, sharp and unflinching.
People. Greedy, fearful, and desperate people. The disappearances. They're no curse. Someone doesn't want you looking too closely.
She pushed a small object across the table, a rusted key. Akira picked it up, examining the intricate design etched into its surface.
That opens the gate behind the shrine. If you're going to find answers, that's where you'll need to go.
As Akira left Hannah's home, the unease from earlier returned, stronger than before. The villager's silence, the boy's words, the mask, all of it painted a picture of a community hiding something dangerous. The key felt heavy in his pocket as he walked back toward the inn, his mind already piecing together a plan for the night ahead. The forest loomed dark and uninviting, the path to the shrine barely visible in the dimming light. Akira's footsteps slowed as he approached, the weight of the village's secrets pressing down on him like the gathering storm clouds overhead. The air grew colder as Akira and Sakura stepped through the narrow gate behind the shrine, the rusted key turning with a groan that echoed unnaturally in the quiet night. A hidden stone staircase spiraled downward into darkness, its edges damp and slick with moss. Sakura held a lantern aloft, its flickering light casting long shadows on the walls. The faint smell of mildew mixed with the metallic tang of rust, making the air heavy and oppressive.
This must have been sealed for decades. Look at the erosion.
Akira nodded, his fingers brushing against the carved stone walls as they descended. The carvings depicted scenes of daily life, harvesting, trade, and feasts, but interspersed were images of conflict. Warriors with swords, ships laden with goods, and figures carrying chests through shadowy tunnels. The deeper they went, the more chaotic the scenes became, culminating in depictions of shackled prisoners and armed guards.
These carvings, they're not just decorative. They're telling a story.
A story of greed and violence. It matches what Hannah said about the shrine's past. This place wasn't just sacred, it was strategic.
The staircase ended abruptly, opening into a wide chamber with a low, vaulted ceiling. The walls were lined with crumbling wooden beams, their surfaces etched with symbols Akira recognized from his earlier research, markings used by smugglers to communicate directions and warnings. The floor was uneven, littered with debris, broken pottery, scraps of fabric, and the rusted remains of tools.
It's a bunker, maybe part of a larger network.
Akira's flashlight swept the room, its beam catching faint glints of metal in the corners. He approached one pile and crouched, picking up a tarnished coin. Its surface bore the emblem of a long-defunct trading company.
Smuggling, most likely. The tunnels would have been perfect for moving contraband unnoticed. But this doesn't explain the disappearances.
A faint breeze stirred the stagnant air, carrying with it the faintest hint of decay. Sakura moved toward a large wooden door set into the far wall, its surface reinforced with iron bands.
This must lead further into the tunnels.
Akira stepped beside her, his hand brushing the door's surface. The wood felt brittle, but solid enough to hold its secrets. With a nod, he reached for the iron handle and pushed. The door groaned open, revealing another passage, narrower than the staircase, but lined with faint tracks in the dirt floor. Lantern hooks protruded from the walls at intervals, though most were broken or missing entirely.
Track someone's been here recently.
They moved cautiously, Sakura's lantern illuminating the path ahead. The passage twisted and turned, the walls closing in until they were forced to walk single file. The carvings continued here, but they were rougher, more hurried. Akira paused to examine one depicting a group of figures lowering a large chest into the ground.
They buried something down here. Or hid it.
Sakura's voice was tight. The villagers' fear might come from these tunnels. Imagine growing up with stories of people disappearing down here, only to find old carvings like these. They emerged into a second chamber, larger than the first, but more haphazardly constructed. Crates were stacked along the walls, many of them splintered open, their contents long gone. In the center of the room stood a table, its surface cluttered with maps, ledgers, and a rusted lantern. Akira sifted through the papers, his brow furrowing as he read.
Shipping manifests. Ledgers for trading routes. These are decades old, but they match the timeline Hannah mentioned. Smugglers must have used this as a headquarters.
Sakura's voice came from the far corner.
Akira, over here.
He crossed the room to find her kneeling beside a pile of dirt. Sticking out of the ground was a shoe, its leather cracked and worn. Akira crouched, his stomach tightening as he brushed away the dirt to reveal a skeletal foot still inside.
A body.
Or what's left of one.
The discovery hung heavy in the air. Akira's mind raced as he pieced together the clues. The carvings, the smuggling, the masked figures. Someone was still using these tunnels. Someone who didn't want their secrets uncovered. A faint sound echoed from the passage they had entered through, a scuff of a shoe against stone. Akira rose, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm.
We're not alone.
The oppressive silence of the chamber magnified the sound of their breathing. Sakura extinguished her lantern, leaving only Akira's flashlight to cut through the darkness. He scanned the room, his senses on high alert.
Do you think it's the smugglers?
Or someone trying to protect what's left of their operation. Either way, we need to move.
They retraced their steps cautiously, their pace quicker now. The narrow passage seemed to close in tighter, the walls pressing against their nerves as much as their bodies. When they reached the main chamber, the faintest sound of voices echoed from above.
Someone's at the shrine.
Sakura's grip tightened on his arm.
What do we do?
Akira's mind was already calculating.
We watch. We learn who they are and what they're after. Then we act.
The heavy wooden door groaned open, its rusted hinges protesting with every inch. Akira stepped through first, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The air inside was stale and suffocating, thick with the scent of mildew and something faintly metallic. Sakura followed close behind, her footsteps hesitant but steady. The room beyond was vast, its stone walls lined with shelves and crates stacked haphazardly. The crates bore faded shipping labels, their markings obscured by dirt and age. At the center of the chamber stood a long table covered in maps, ledgers, and scattered tools. Lanterns hung from iron hooks, though their glass was cracked and caked with grime. Akira's flashlight swept across the room, illuminating a large chest against the far wall. Its ornate design, though tarnished, suggested wealth and importance. Beside it lay scattered artifacts, ceremonial masks, jewelry, and relics that glinted faintly in the dim light.
These aren't just relics. They're stolen.
Akira nodded grimly, his mind piecing together the clues. The shrine, the tunnels, the masked figures, it all pointed to a smuggling operation. A sudden noise from behind made them both turn sharply. The faint scuff of boots on stone. Akira's hand went to his sidearm, drawing it smoothly as he stepped toward the sound.
Show yourself.
From the shadows emerged two men, their faces obscured by scars tied hastily around their noses and mouths. One held a crowbar, the other a knife. Their eyes darted between Akira and Sakura, calculating.
You shouldn't have come here.
Akira kept his voice calm but firm.
I'm a detective. Lower your weapons and step back.
The second smuggler sneered, gripping his knife tighter.
You think you're walking out of here with our secrets? Think again.
Before Akira could respond, Sakura's voice cut through the tension.
This is what it's all about, isn't it? The disappearances, the fear. You've been using the shrine to hide this operation.
The first smuggler hesitated, his gaze flicking to the stolen artifacts. His partner, however, stepped forward, knife raised.
You've seen too much.
The room erupted into chaos. The second smuggler lunged, his knife glinting in the flashlight's beam. Akira sidestepped, his training taking over as he deflected the attack, twisting the man's wrist and sending the knife clattering to the ground. Sakura grabbed a rusted lantern from the table, swinging it with surprising force and striking the first smuggler's arm. The crowbar fell from his grasp, and he stumbled backward.
Sakura, stay back.
She didn't listen, her eyes blazing with determination. Together, they managed to subdue the two men, tying them with ropes found near the crates. The smugglers struggled, their curses echoing in the chamber.
Who else is involved? Speak.
The first smuggler glared at him, silent. The second, however, spat angrily.
You think it's just us? Half the village turns a blind eye. They know what's going on, but they'd rather let us do our work than risk stirring up trouble.
Akira's stomach churned. The boy's words, the villagers' fear, the elders' silence. It all made sense now. The village wasn't just a victim. Parts of it were complicit.
What about the missing people? Where are they?
The first smuggler's sneer faltered, a flicker of guilt crossing his face.
We didn't kill them. They got too close, so we locked them away. Farther down.
Akira's grip on his flashlight tightened. He motioned for Sakura to follow as he moved toward a small, reinforced door at the back of the chamber. It was padlocked, but the key hung nearby on a rusted nail. He unlocked it, pushing the door open to reveal a narrow passageway. The tunnel led to a smaller chamber, where three figures sat huddled together, their faces pale but alive. Akira recognized them from the descriptions in the case files. The young woman, the older man, the teenage boy. Their eyes widened as the flashlight beam fell on them.
You're safe now. Let's get you out of here.
Sakura helped the villagers to their feet, her voice soft and reassuring. As they made their way back to the main chamber, Akira glanced at the bound smugglers. The weight of the truth settled heavily on his shoulders. The shrine's dark history had become a tool for modern greed, its secrets twisted into a weapon against its own people. By the time they emerged from the tunnels, the first light of dawn was breaking over the village. The rescued villagers were met with tears and embraces, though the relief was tempered by the knowledge of what had been uncovered. Akira watched as the elder approached, his face lined with guilt.
We knew something was wrong, but we were too afraid to act.
Akira's voice was firm, but not unkind.
Fear doesn't excuse silence. You need to decide what kind of community you want to be.
As the villagers began to gather, Murmuring among themselves, Akira turned to Sakura. She held the fox pendant tightly, her expression pensive.
The shrine's been a symbol of this village for centuries. We let its history become an excuse for darkness. That has to change.
Akira nodded, the weight of the case lifting slightly. Together, they watched as the villagers began to dismantle the remnants of the smugglers' operation, reclaiming the shrine as their own. The first rays of dawn painted the village in soft hues of gold and pink as Akira and Sakura led the missing villagers down the winding path from the shrine. The young woman clutched her mother's arm. The older man moved slowly but steadily, and the teenage boy's wide-eyed silence spoke volumes. When they emerged into the square, a hush fell over the gathering crowd. One by one, the villagers recognized their missing loved ones, relief and disbelief rippling through the air. The mother of the boy broke into a run, pulling him into a tearful embrace. Others followed, tentative at first, then with joyous cries that shattered the morning stillness. Sakura watched the scene with folded arms, her face a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. Akira stood beside her, his gaze scanning the crowd, noting the subtle shifts in expressions. Amid the relief, there was a lingering unease, a recognition that their village's secrets had finally come to light. The elder stepped forward, his walking stick tapping against the cobblestones. His eyes met Akira's, and he bowed deeply.
We owe you more than words can say, Detective. You've brought our people home.
Akira inclined his head, but didn't let the praise linger.
It's not just about bringing them back. You'll need to face the truth about what's been happening here, about the shrine, the tunnels, and those who exploited your silence.
The elder's shoulders sagged, and he nodded slowly.
Fear kept us quiet. Fear of the shrine, of those men, and of what speaking out might bring. But you've shown us that hiding only makes it worse.
As the villagers began the work of dismantling the smugglers' caches and cleaning out the tunnels, Akira and Sakura stood at the edge of the square, watching the scene unfold. The village, once shrouded in secrecy and fear, seemed to breathe more freely now. The air felt lighter, even as the weight of their collective past lingered.
Do you think they'll really change?
Akira considered her question, his hand brushing against the fox-shaped charm in his pocket, a gift from the boy who had first spoken of the masked figures.
It'll take time. But fear loses its power when you shine a light on it. They've taken the first step. That's more than most.
She nodded, her expression thoughtful.
And you? Do you feel different?
Akira hesitated, the memories of past failures flickering at the edges of his mind. The missing child he hadn't saved, the guilt that had haunted him for years. It was still there, but quieter now. He had made mistakes, but here, he had made a difference.
I think I've learned that some things can be set right. Not everything, but enough.
Sakura smiled faintly, her gaze drifting back to the village.
That's enough, isn't it?
At the station, the train's whistle cut through the crisp morning air. Akira's bag felt heavier than when he'd arrived, weighed down with the evidence and stories of a village that had almost lost its way. Sakura stood beside him, her hands tucked into her coat pockets.
Thank you, Akira, for everything.
You were part of this too. Don't forget that.
She nodded, a rare softness in her expression. As the train doors opened, Akira stepped inside, turning to look at her one last time.
Take care of yourself.
You too.
As the train pulled away, the village faded into the mist, its outlines blurred, but no longer ominous. Akira leaned back in his seat, watching the countryside roll by. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the wooden fox charm, turning it over in his hand. He thought of the villagers, their secrets laid bare, their futures uncertain but brighter. He thought of Sakura, her determination and resilience shining through even in the darkest moments. Most of all, he thought of the boy, whose courage to speak had started it all. The guilt of his past failures still lingered, but it no longer felt insurmountable. This case had reminded him of the power of confronting fear and seeking truth, no matter how painful. It wasn't about erasing the past, but learning to carry it and move forward. As the train plunged into a tunnel, Akira closed his eyes, the faint echo of the villagers' laughter still ringing in his ears. For the first time in years, he allowed himself a small, genuine smile. The work wasn't over, but for now it was enough.